Well, welcome everyone to the second WAB panel of Fall Term 2007. This evening's topic is titled From Bell Bottoms to YouTube, the Psychology and Culture of Fads and Useless Gadgets. And in response to student interest for an alternative format, we're honored to have Doug Wilson joining us this evening from the Lundquist College of Business. And we've designed tonight's discussion to be a bit more participatory and experiential than some of our past panels. And so Doug has a very engaging agenda for some collaborative group exercises and discussion this evening. And so we're looking forward to it. We've also encouraged all of our participants to bring what they consider to be their most useless gadget or an item that perhaps is representational of a fad in their own life or their family's lives. And so we'll be seeing what some of those are this evening as we do our small collaborative group work. Just to mention a few things about Doug Wilson. Doug is one of the double ducks, as we know them, at the University of Oregon. He's a graduate of the business school, 1990. I don't know if he wanted me to mention that because he felt that. But he received his MBA and has since returned, is now an instructor and teaches courses in entrepreneurship as well as graduate courses. And so, Doug, we're just honored to have you here this evening, and we're looking forward to, again, a more participatory panel. So if you could join me in welcoming Doug.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here tonight. And my guess is that many of you are either between or just got done with midterms, so more credit to you. Hey, I'm curious because there might be some relevance here. Are any of you in Dave Dussault's BA 101 class this term? Okay. I'm surprised. 25% of students on campus take that course. And so I thought our chances might be higher than what they were tonight. Well, we'll talk about some concepts that come out of that class. But to begin, I'd like to just introduce this concept to say that there probably isn't any rational explanation for why some products are in fact fads. And we'll talk about the differences between a fad and a trend. And technically there is a differentiation, and we'll have some examples of those. But fads are a really good example of illogical, often uniquely American behavior. Now, fads do exist in other countries. That's not to say that they don't. But it just seems like we have had more of them. And probably more embarrassing fads than other countries or cultures have experienced too. So we're going to talk about what constitutes a fad, how it is different from a trend, and then I'm going to suggest some aspects of this phenomena that reflect our culture, reflect, I think, social behavior in a lot of ways, and also reflect this free enterprise system that our country aspires to. The fact that people, businesses, organizations, historically have made tremendous fortunes and lost tremendous fortunes over fads. And so we'll talk about what that means and what's involved there. But I think, first of all, let's just get a couple examples. And some of you, I think, have brought some things with you. I think the visual thing is good, right? So we can kind of get, a sense of what we're talking about. Who has some examples of a product that is, at least at some point or in some groups, maybe some subcultures, was within our society, was considered a fad? Pet rocks. Who's old enough to know pet rocks? Oh, good for you. I appreciate this. I appreciate this. I'll bet a lot of you guys don't know what a pet rock thing is. I don't even know the year. Early 70s? Is that fair? Okay, so literally, you could buy a rock. It was kind of encaged in, literally it was like a rock off the street or out of the river. It was encaged in this little kind of wooden box, is how I remember it. Maybe a little bit of straw on the bottom or some kind of packing stuff, and then a story and a little thing about the rock. Phenomenal sales. Don't know why. I haven't seen one for years. They would certainly be collectibles at this point. That's one thing about fads, is that they do tend to be collectibles. Over time, if you don't die first, they may be worth something again. What are some other examples of fads that physically we can use as an example, or that you have in the room? I'm really trying to coach this out of you, but yeah. I remember the year was 1984. This is really not a pretty memory because we had just moved, and we had our first daughter was she would have been just turning 4 years old. And I waited in line for the Cabbage Patch dolls at Toys R Us on like 4 different occasions because they kept selling out. But my kid had to have this Cabbage Patch doll. You just had to have it. There's an ad now. I think it's a Geico ad that does this kind of parody on Cabbage Patch dolls. Incredibly ugly, kind of frightening figure. But I bet some of you had Cabbage Patch dolls. Is that true? Ah, good. You still have them? Okay.
Well, actually, it was my mom's this past year.
Really?
Yeah, actually, I have my mom's too.
That's making me feel really old. Because like I say, there was a huge flurry. For a couple years, it was kind of similar to the Elmo phenomenon. Yeah. Another example of, there were a couple Christmases, one in particular, where they were sold out. We'll talk about the problems that businesses have in terms of supply and demand with fads, because that is problematic. It is problematic. Are there physically any other examples that we should look at?
I don't have it, but the POG things kids used to trade.
Yeah, the Pogs.
That was good for 3 or 4 years.
Yeah. Oh, I had those.
This was honestly, I never have really understood that. So tell me what the attraction was.
Oh, I just like the sparkly ones.
But like, was it just a collector's item, or was there like a sequence of the Pogs and how they?
There's a game, and you would flip it.
Yeah, slammers.
Yeah.
Big metal ones that you hit the.
Yeah, that was my favorite one of mine.
They would have Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle ones.
Had different themes.
All different kinds of Pokemon.
I'm worried that you're far too connected with these Pogs. There may be a need for some separation from that. Well, we'll talk more. We'll talk more about what some of these examples are, and I hope you'll have an opportunity to kind of come up with some more ideas. But I'm going to suggest something. I'm going to suggest that there is this difference between a fad and a trend. And in fact, in the case of a trend, we'll start there. In the case of a trend, the fashion industry is probably the better example I can think of, although it happens in a lot of different products and different kind of industries. But what happens with a trend typically is that it's an ongoing kind of theme or something that's in vogue, a style, a design, a look, a color, and it typically kind of lasts over a period of time. And then products will pick up on that trend. So for example, I'm really excited that basically the whole hipster jean thing is kind of transitioning because that was, in terms of where jeans hit, particularly people in their teens and 20s, was very different than where jeans were designed when I was in school. And that lasted, what, 10, 12 years? I don't know if that was that long a period of time. But basically, we saw that as a trend versus a fad is very product specific. So this is something that I'm going to, and I promise I will not be too kind of analytic on this. But I'm going to draw this curve. And really, it's a bell-shaped curve, but we're just going to see part of it because that's usually how a product life cycle curve is kind of displayed. For most products that are introduced, people think about, okay, we're going to introduce it on this date, and it's going to start selling product. And word will get around, and by month 2 or month 6 or month 12, we'll have higher volumes of those products sold. I mean, typically that's what happens with a lot of products that are manufactured. My guess, I don't know this for certain, but I think I'm fairly comfortable saying that products like the Pet Rock, products like Tickle Me Elmo, Cabbage Patch dolls, maybe Pogs, I don't know. They had done projections and thought, okay, we're gonna get some momentum built up here. There's word of mouth. We'll do an advertising campaign. We'll get a lot of interest in this. But they project this kind of manageable and calculated curve, when in fact what happens with fads is 2 phenomena. One is that it takes off far faster than anybody ever thought it was going to do. I mean, it's like they have production problems. They can't create, make, provide enough product to get out to the marketplace. And so there's all kinds of these demand problems. And again, some of those fads that we talked about, they dealt with that. And even though they lost money, what does happen oftentimes with fads is that the desire, the inability to get access to product makes it even more enticing. And it, in fact, drives demand, although people have to wait until they get access to it. eBay's a great thing, and it didn't exist with some of these fads that we talked about. But eBay's a great way to assess, well, how much is this pent-up demand worth? Because you can go to the site and see what people are bidding for X that ran out. Tickle Me Elmo was an example of that, where you'd be paying hundreds of dollars for these products at a time where the actual retail price is much less. But demand is really funded by that. The other aspect of fads, obviously, is that for some reason, some phenomenon happens, and it's a study in terms of saturation, really. But what also happens, because the product life cycle curve, I mean, in some cases, this demand for a product of any kind may continue for years, maybe even decades. I mean, if you think of vacuum cleaners, it's 50 and 60 years. But with fads, it very radically drops off. I mean, to the point that it is just uncool to even be seen with this thing. You want to bury it in your closet. You're not going to wear it. You're not going to play with it. You're not going to be seen with your friends, certainly, with that in hand, because it really is past its prime. So the fad phenomena really affects that and really causes that to shift and change. This phenomena has surprises, as I mentioned before. A lot of times, these manufacturers, I mean, let's talk about it in a product form. Again, it can be behavioral or other kinds of non-tangible activities. But in a product form, people are surprised because it's like, oh, we thought, we hoped, we wanted it to be exciting, but we had no idea the response that we're going to get. So that's one element of surprise. The other element is predicting or understanding the kind of social and cultural activity that goes along with this. Because in most cases, fads have a very specific segment that they attract. The ones that we mentioned before, a lot of those are more child-oriented fads. They didn't necessarily appeal to people in their 50s. Although people in their 50s, I mean, they certainly have fads and experience that. But it does tend to be very target market specific, if I can use that term. It's a group that identifies with it and connects with it, and is kind of an interesting phenomena because so much of it is dependent upon this acceptance and acknowledgement within a group. Now, historically, we can see how communications would share and reinforce this, television or programming of any kind. But today, what happens? In terms of communications and social networks, yeah, I mean, it's just far quicker. It's more targeted because there are so many very unique, specific sites that do connect with certain target market groups or demographics or lifestyle type of behaviors, and so it really puts it on steroids in terms of the acceptance, the knowledge, the ability to become aware, and then also to participate in that fad. Again, either because of the behavior or because of purchasing the product. So I'm gonna collect your stacks, and so thank you. And I'm gonna try and keep these separate here. Thank you. And okay, cool, awesome. So I'll bet that in this stack we've got some duplicates that, as groups, you thought of the same things or maybe played off some other conversation that we had before. But what I'd like to do now is I'm going to give each group a stack, and it's not going to be yours. And what you're going to do is you're going to look through this, and you're going to, first of all, identify what you think is at least one example of a fad and one example of a trend. Now, you may not find that there's a trend on these cards. Maybe the group really agrees with you and feels like, no, they really all are fads. But we're going to try that and just see what kind of examples we come up. So really, you're looking at both ends of the spectrum. Within the deck that you receive, the best example of what you think is a fad, and then the one that you think, no, it doesn't qualify. It describes an ongoing kind of trend or concept or idea, style, fashion that really does still exist. It didn't have that spike and that drop. So I'm going to make sure that So did you guys break up in two groups? Kind of, sort of? No? Okay, then I'm going to do it this way. You guys are going to have this deck, and you guys will take this deck, and then you're over here. So we're going to take a few more minutes, and this is what you'll do, is that somehow you'll either pass around the cards or maybe read them off so that you can kind of take an inventory of what the concepts are, and then you're going to find one example that you feel is a very strong example of a fad, and one that you think is probably the weaker of the selection that you have to deal with. For example, the Chia Pet. Remember the Chia Pet?
I still want to.
Really? Again, highly concerning. But, you know, honestly, I bet we'll see ads for Chia Pets again as Christmas nears. Over time, hundreds of thousands of those things have been sold. There you go. See, expecting. Because what does happen with some of these kind of phenomena is that they will reappear, either over a span of a generation after they've been forgotten, or on some kind of an ongoing sporadic basis. But it's interesting to see that Beanie Babies, you know, that was something I never understood. I really never got that whole thing. People were collecting them. This friend of ours, like, she still has this cabinet packed full of those worthless things. But for a while, they were very sought out. Their value actually would increase as they'd be retired. People were beating down the doors of McDonald's to get Beanie Babies when they had that as a part of their promotion thing. You know, it used to be very. I think it was Tide was the name of the company that produced those, but very, very sought after. And today, I don't know if you would be able to give them away. I mean,
Yeah.
is there a following of them?
That's why we put it on the trend category.
You can go into Hallmark and buy those things.
Gosh, it scares me. Anyway,
Yeah.
but you know, again, it is something that has transitioned because at one point it was like frantic.
Well, I think with Beanie Babies, they kind of started making them more like birthday Beanie Babies and stuff. Like, normally my mom will get me one for my birthday that's like the newer one that has like the hat or whatever. So I think that they kind of try and make them so that like
To extend that.
it like works for certain things, so that people are like, oh, this is cute, I'll put it in my kid's stocking.
Mhm.
You know?
Yeah, and again, different than a classic fad that would die completely and just kind of go out of existence, is that it has had some life, kind of to the point that was made earlier. It has had some life that's extended on, and so maybe at a far lower level, but still demand exists. The talking fish on the plaque, again, this is on the fad side. I don't know if you guys can see this very well. You know, that's a phenomenon, isn't it? I don't know if there's a home in the Midwest that doesn't have one, though. Seriously, you know, I mean, I love them. Yeah. Where's
My parents' home does not have one.
Oh, there you go. Where are you from?
Kansas.
Okay, Kansas. Oh my gosh, Kansas. I've spent a lot of time. Where in Kansas?
Topeka.
Ah, really? Oh, good for you. Spent a lot of time around the Salina area. Beautiful country. There you go. Anyway, so again, but a phenomena that's certainly popular with fishermen, I guess, and over here on the fad side, and then Furbies. When our oldest daughter is now 25, when she went to college, she checked into her dorm, and she was very concerned because her roommate had a Furby on her desk already. Her new roommate, and it went downhill from there, I might add. But again, popular. That was probably current for a lot of you guys, right? As far as the Furby thing, is that true? Two? That's concerning. Where are they now? Okay, see, Mom's probably got them someplace. Hang on, because they may be worth something. So, this assessment by each of the three groups categorized these as a fad. The interesting thing is that Beanie Babies is a trend over here, and probably because of that kind of that latent effect. So again, that could be argued as far as if it is truly a fad or if it had some life. To a degree, Chia Pets could fall in that same category. Again, versus the pet rock or versus some of the other examples that we talked about, where it is just, you know, it just disappears. They just don't appear anymore. MySpace, Facebook, and blogs. I'm so glad this came up because, again, it's a good example of really a non-product, more of a behavior, a web kind of an experience. And it'll be interesting to see if, in fact, that continues over time or if a new technology oversteps it. What can happen with some of these phenomena is that it may have lasted longer, but just a leapfrog technology or another system or process really replaced it. The experience is still there, but just through a different kind of mechanism. And then Rubik's Cube. I don't know the year that those, can anybody remember when they may have come out? 74, something like that. I mean, you still see them around once in a while, right? Yeah, I mean, it used to be the sales of those at one point was just phenomenal. Again, they couldn't keep them in stock, very high demand, and today it's more of a novelty. It kind of captures that era more than really represents a game that people actively play, but certainly has meaning from that standpoint. So we can look at these kind of phenomena and argue about them or kind of debate in terms of what our perception is. But the reality is that none of these, in both categories, they wouldn't have existed if there wasn't this social kind of phenomena that went along with it and some reinforcement for it that identified people as a group and had some meaningful connection because having one meant that you were part of that community.
Well, I just want to point out another trend that I just thought of, and knitting. It comes around every time. Like in high school, there used to be girls who would just sit in class and knit and knit. So I just thought that would be kind of a fun one to discuss.
That's interesting. Yeah, one that if we can look back for hundreds of years, actually, that has kind of had ebbs and flows in terms of those activities. I'm going to grab these cards, and then I think there's another stack that I don't have. Is that true? Thank you. Because one of the topics that I saw written on one of these cards as you guys were working on these related to addictive behaviors. It wasn't brought up in our discussion, but what do you think about that? Addictive behaviors as either as a fad or as a trend. What's your reaction to that?
I believe it. I mean, I think there's certain recreational drugs that come and go or peak out and they're cool to do that. And I think they're longer than the product kind of spikes that you talk about. But I think they do that. I read an article talking about designer marijuana where people cultivate this just for a certain aspect of that. And there's a whole sub-market with the, purpose and yellow or whatever. It's just like, that was really new to think that way.
It's I would suggest that there are attributes of some of those behaviors that will fall in and out of vogue. And if, I mean, honestly, if we looked at strictly demand and usage, methamphetamines is on a huge spike, especially in rural Oregon. But it's on a huge spike. And because of its addictive nature, it'll be curious to see if, in fact, it is replaced or if it goes away over time or if it always exists to a certain degree. But in some cases, those addictive kind of behaviors, or at least substances, habits, patterns, can fall in those categories. Coffee shops. I mean, I remember in the 60s when coffee shops existed, they kind of went away then, and now we've got Starbucks. Is that going to be a fad that we could look back historically and see it had its rise and it had its abrupt fall? Or do you think that's with our culture on a long-term basis?
It's related to drug use because it's cats.
It has some, attractive qualities that people get hooked on. I am shocked as far as how faithful some of you are in terms of getting your coffee and making sure you have it every morning in class or to get your morning started. And really that phenomena, the idea of having to have a beverage in your hand. I mean, the whole concept of having a place in your car for a beverage didn't really come into play until Ford Motor Company introduced it some 17 years ago. I mean, it just didn't exist to have a mug holder in your car. And today you wouldn't buy a car without it. So we can see those kind of trends and patterns that have taken place. There were some other examples like style things like afros, although we're seeing a resurgence of that to a certain degree. And we can also see things like behaviors. Third world adoption behaviors came up a couple times. That's really interesting. And if that's a trend or a fad, certainly has gotten celebrity kind of endorsements. It's a key factor to have some kind of confirmation during the development of that fad that says it really is cool to do this. There's it's not just you that likes holding on to this thing or that enjoys your Furby. There are a lot of other people that do as well, and so it's a place to be, and it's a place to really understand how to kind of identify it. But this is the downside. This is the downside. You can go online today, and there's one site that will tell you how to create the next fad. And you know what? I don't think that you can do that. I think too many variables come into play. Although companies would like to, they'd aspire to have their product a fad. I don't know if you can do that, because it really is this alignment of this acceptance and recognition and either easy accessibility or the desire to have access to that really constitute and really can change the kind of the face and the future of fads. All those variables need to come into play, or the product may have this, this quiet growth, standard life cycle curve, but really not make any impact or be accepted or recognized by pop culture or have any more endorsement than that.
Like Transformers kind of be a fad that just came back because of the movie. I don't know, that was my favorite toy when I was little.
Yeah.
And then it died and you couldn't find them anywhere, and now there's movies, and now there's like hundreds of toys on the shelf.
I know. I was at Costco this last weekend, and there was a Transformer car right there. And yeah, I think that's a good example. I think that was a Spielberg movie, right? Yeah. I think that was very gutsy to do because of maybe smart, but because of taking something that maybe had kind of been put away and then basing this movie on it. But the movie got great reviews, and it certainly is completely kind of bouncing back as far as a solution for maybe a lot of kids that haven't really seen it before. It's the first time for them.
Well, like on top of that, I guess there was someone who had graduated college and was, in their like 20s, and a little kid, and they were both at the same movie, watching the previews, and the Transformers came on, and the little kid was like, ew, I don't want to see that one. That looks so stupid, because he didn't have, the Transformers when he was young, and the older kid was like, be quiet, I've been waiting for that movie to come out since I was young, and was like so upset. So
I had the
it's
exact same conversation with the little kid. I was like, knock it off.
This is going to be good. Hang in there.
Waiting.
So I think that it's true that it was gutsy, because people who they would probably try and, send that to.
Right, right, exactly. It didn't have an identity with it, because that's really the powerful part of it. But when fads die, they die quickly. Did you have a question?
Oh, actually, I was just going to point out, on that note, Kim, that I actually had a conversation with someone when there was rumor of the Transformers movie coming out, who said, who would make a movie about something that is so over? Like Transformers, that was when we were little. And then as the movie started to get more hype and, Spielberg is doing it, oh my gosh, then it was like the fad died, then it picked back up again. And so now I'm wondering if it's like going to become a trend, or like the Transformers toys, or if they're going to just die back down again.
Right, right. It'll be interesting to see. I think the stage is really well set for it to have a nice little rise again, and we may see it for another 3 or 4 years with a far younger group of people. The toy that I saw was designed for like what I would imagine to be a 6 to 8 year old child, not necessarily someone that had experienced it before. So again, it's a whole new exposure for that group.
I was going to say, it might even be turning into a sort of fad to try and bring back fads with the movies, because they have the Ninja Turtles movie too, and that's
Good point.
Yeah.
And they're making a
Care
Thundercats
Bears.
movie as well.
Say it again.
They're making a Thundercats movie as well, which is like the same thing.
Right.
Our generation's having.
Interesting. At times it's like they really don't have an original thought, do they? It's like, let's dust off something from 16 years ago and see if that flies this time. But yeah, again, very influential. The movie theater has become a very common communication point for our culture. And if we see things endorsed there, it affects behaviors, and also companies respond to that and pick up on those trends or those activities or those opportunities that exist. But just kind of to wrap this thing up, when fads die, it's a brutal death to these companies. Again, these organizations, many have made tremendous profits off these fads. In many cases, the margins, the fact that the product is not an expensive product to make, but the cost for you and I to buy that product is really substantial. So they make a tremendous amount of money, particularly off that high volume, and then all of a sudden the fad dies, the warehouse is full because they thought it was going to be another good season because they didn't predict this. In their minds, that product life cycle curve was going to keep going. It wasn't going to drop off. And many companies have lost the same fortune that they made when that fad dies because they did a poor job of predicting it. Fads are difficult to predict. You don't know when that spike's going to hit. Are we still climbing, or is this the moment before it completely falters?
So for an item to be considered a fad, does a company have to make a profit when it first comes out? Because like with the example of the PlayStation 3, everybody wanted one, but they made it so expensive to produce that they didn't make any money on it at all, and it just dropped off. And I see them at Costco that have these huge crates of these things, and they can't give them away now. And
That's
there have been
interesting.
people getting shot over them over at Best Buy. It's like,
right.
what's up with that?
Yeah, and to that point, the phenomena of a fad doesn't relate to profitability. That really is a reflection of how the company either managed it or how they planned or strategically kind of positioned themselves for it. Sony's had a hard time. They've done some kind of foolish things in terms of competing in the game market. But in many cases, because the volume is so high and because they do have good margin, these companies can make a fortune. But again, if they're stuck with a ton of inventory that they can't give away, that they can't sell to a third world country, it's like, what do? And it can really go as quickly as it came. So that's kind of my take on fads. I think what you should do is think about the kind, and let's think of fashion things, but think about the kind of trends or fads. And I'm going to dare you this week to wear one or carry one around and see the response that you get. Some people, they'll connect with you and get kind of all excited, and for some people, you'll be the biggest dweeb they've seen all term, because why would you ever be seen? And the reality of it is, it kind of, I think, communicates the power of what those items, or if you decide to do the Macarena at lunch tomorrow, of what that would communicate about you and how people perceive that and how you would feel about doing that because of that connection with either what that fad communicated or that period of time when it was in vogue compared to now when it may not be. So I would challenge you to give that some thought and take my dare and give me a report back if you do. What kind of comments or other questions do you have before we wrap up? Yes.
Like one thing when you were talking about like creating fads and everything, I thought it was really funny because like in Japan, like they'd put things on magazines and everything and say, oh, it's really popular in like the States, and then like everybody in Japan would start buying it. And an example of that would be the scooters, like the Razor. Yeah,
Yes.
the Razor ones. Like they had those in Japan like a really long time ago, and they like publicized it everywhere as like it's really popular in the States. Like, and I talked to friends here, and they had no idea what it was about. And then now I see them once in a while, and it's like, whoa, okay. So like kids, it's starting to come back to them. But,
Yeah.
like they never knew about it before, and like I talked to people, and they would have no idea what it was about. So it's like funny that they could create the fads in Japan and like say that it's from the U.S., but it really isn't.
Right. But it was a way to endorse it, wasn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Gives it credibility. I'm sorry?
Oh, I said I do remember the Razor. Like both of my brothers went out and bought one, and then like 2 weeks later they were half price, and everyone was over it. So
Right.
I do remember that.
Right. I mean, you still see them occasionally, but not to the degree when you just had to have one. I remember that Christmas as well.
Well, I think the same thing happens here though, because right now the little babies are really popular. What are they called in Japan? They're well, like maybe it's like they're like little babies.
Doll type babies?
They're like little doll type babies, and a lot of them people have them on their phone, and then they dress in like different things. Like there's one that's corn and one that's watermelon and stuff. What?
Like those photos that what's her name? That she dressed up all the babies in like different costumes.
No,
Oh,
okay,
get
never
it.
mind.
It's the
I
name
think
of the
it'll
photographer.
hit more as it comes, but I know someone, and like it's the same thing, like they're really popular in Japan, so they're becoming popular over here. But I'll have to figure out what they're called, and they're like little decorations. They're little like tiny babies, and they're a whole bunch.
This theme kind of thing going on. Yeah, and it's interesting because there are some phenomena that have happened with Asia to the U.S., U.S. to Europe, that where these trends, fads have been picked up, and then they have a whole new life, or at least maybe have a twist that takes on a whole new kind of being in the environment.
just to correlate to what she's saying, we get Wired Magazine, which is kind of a tech head products magazine, and they've always, an ongoing segment every month is a little blurb on watching Japanese girls, schoolgirls, and what they're buying, because they're getting technology about a year ahead of us.
Right.
What are they doing? What's popular with them? What are they spending their discretionary money on? And that's in that magazine all the time. It's just called that, Japanese schoolgirl watch.
How fascinating. And as a lead to what we may be seeing within the U.S. market, for example.
This is kind of the...
Yeah. That's really interesting.
And we assume it's true, but we don't really know.
From what I know, like, even in Japan, they look at all the, like, high school girls, and they'll just, like, go to the high school girls for everything, and if it's popular within them, they'll try to get it bigger, and it usually does get bigger from that.
That's really interesting. In fact, I just talked about this in my class this week. There's this term called intermarket segmentation. And all that means is that there are some segments, teenage girls are one of them, that no matter what place in the world, what country, what culture, they all kind of respond to and like the same things. Where if you looked at most any other age group or economic class, they would have very different responses based upon culture, based upon even region, to the same kind of messaging or interests or phenomena. But teenage girls, it tends to be a kind of this worldwide phenomenon, at least now, that that anywhere in the world you can kind of communicate with them in the same way, and they'll respond positively if it's something they associate with. Other comments or questions before we wrap up?
Can everyone show what they brought?
Yeah, in fact, I was hoping I could con that out of you earlier, but yeah, because I know some of you have. So let's just get the goods out. I saw a rubber chicken over there. Yay, the rubber chicken! You know, always a crowd pleaser. What else? What else did you bring?
Oh, shoot.
Come on, get out the stuff. Yeah.
I shoot the flying monkey.
Flying monkey. This is a. I would not want to wake up in the middle of the night hearing this. I was not familiar with Woot. How many of you were? Oh, interesting. Give us a 2-second on Woot.
So Woot is a website that every night at 10 o'clock our time sells only one product a day, and it switches over at 10 o'clock every night. You sell electronics and household goods and stuff, but also strange things like the Woot monkey.
So, intermittent reinforcement is very powerful. Sorry about that. And so again, it'll be curious to see, if that site could be considered a fad. And in 4 years or 4 months, will it be still profitable in there? Will be a question. What else did you bring? Let's see some of this stuff.
Mine's a fad that hasn't yet hit. It's
Okay.
called a banana guard. It's supposed to protect your banana.
I get this. And you know what? I am always complaining about my bananas. So that's good. That's fascinating. I'll be curious if this company survives. So what else have you got?
This was really popular at the Jersey Shore. There's all these, I think that's a good place for fads. And it's something that you put in your wrist or your hand. And
Like the bounce ball thing.
yeah.
And it flashes?
And it flashes, yeah.
That's interesting. Are you from Jersey?
No, my mom is.
Okay.
So we go
Tell her
back.
I'm so sorry. The basket case. Oh, and this is the headband hoop game. Anybody played with this in a public forum? Now, this will be, again, a great one to wear to class tomorrow. And they were hoping this would be a big fad. I'm sure of it. I don't know if it kind of made that level of prestige.
Well, someone bought it.
Good point. Good point. What else we got?
A finger, a walking finger.
Oh, so this is like you wind it up and it kind of walks.
Yeah.
Okay.
Along with the running nose.
These are keepers.
Mhm.
These are keepers.
Okay, but this one actually is really cool. This is my favorite of hers.
Okay.
It's a shot glass that lights up.
You put any liquid in it and it lights up.
Oh, it does.
And they
For
sell
$1.
it at Target for $1.
And you'd need this because of
It's amazing.
a new threshold.
Makes parties more
Ha-
fun.
Wouldn't have even thought it would be an attraction, but
Actually, they were sold out.
it's novel. You got to give it that. Anything else we've got?
No.
Oh, what a stash! That's awesome. That's awesome. Be concerned. Very, very concerned. But thanks so much. Appreciate your time.
The classic wine the chatting.
Oh, the chatting tea. Been around forever in some form. Yeah. And you know, probably had its day, but still exists. Still continues to have some life left in it. So, thanks everyone.